After last week's introduction, this week we start the book of John proper. Theologians call this first half of the Gospel, that's chapters 1 to 12, the book of signs. And this half describes the rejection of Jesus by Judaism, his own people. The first 18 verses, as we said last week, are this amazing theological poem that may have even been used as a song in the early church. These 18 verses in turn are split into 4 stanzas, and the first stanza is just verses 1 and 2. It'll be useful to have them in front of you for reference. They read, "In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God." Immediately, it's impossible not to see a parallel with the beginning of the Old Testament, Genesis 1:1, the creation narrative, in the beginning. We'll talk about John's use of this mysterious term, the Word, in a minute, but for now we just need to know that this is John referencing Jesus, as will become clear in future weeks. The very first thing that John wants to establish is that Jesus is God, and that just like the existing Jewish understanding of God, Jesus existed before creation. In the phrase, "the Word was with God," the verb "was" is one that signifies ongoing existence, the same as when God introduces himself as "I am," the one who always was and continues to be. Later in John 8:58, we're told, Jesus answered, "I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am." The "was" used for Abraham means come into existence. He was created like the rest of us, but Jesus just was. He was already there. And the Word was also with God, as well as being God. We see the Trinity here. Jesus, the Word, was not only God himself, but he was with God, the Father and Spirit as well, although the other 2 members are not named separately here. At this point, there is no developed concept of the Trinity. That started to come together in the mid-2nd century, a few decades later. John has been given some deep insight into the nature of God here, whether it was from Jesus himself, which seems eminently likely as one of his inner circle, or by the Spirit's inspiration later on. He shows a theological depth beyond the other gospel writers. So let's have a look at this capital W use of word for Jesus. Word in the Greek is logos. When John refers to this concept, he's tapping into the previous 6 centuries of Greek philosophy that would have underpinned the way that people in Greco-Roman society at that time would have seen the world. This was part of their worldview. So what did logos mean to them? According to Encyclopedia Britannica, yes, it still exists online, the idea originated with the philosopher Heraclitus, who saw in the natural world a reasoning power that was comparable to the reasoning power of the human mind. In effect, he was saying that the universe is not random, but the object of some directing power. Later, the Stoics defined the logos as an active, rational and spiritual principle that permeated all reality. They called the logos providence, nature, God, and the soul of the universe. Now, although the Greeks famously had a God for everything, their philosophers saw one power behind the universe that orders reality in a logical way. The pantheon of Zeus, Apollo, Aphrodite and co acted just like humans in their behaviour. They were neither virtuous nor consistent. They seemed to spend their time misbehaving, playing tricks, satisfying their lusts and deceiving each other. The stories about them were there to try to explain the way things were in an easy to understand way. A bunch of very powerful but very relatable characters. This was reality TV religion, easily accessible, salacious, and entertaining. Logos was much more the intellectual's take on the nature of reality. Funnily enough, the concept is very much how we consider God as Christians. Unchanging, morally virtuous, and underlying everything in reality. It's fascinating that the greatest Greek thinkers saw past their traditional mythology and perceived God's nature through what he had created. This is what theologians call general revelation. God has revealed himself in a general way that anyone can see if we only look at his creation. We see it in Psalm 19:1. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. And in Romans 1:19-20. They know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God. We should take encouragement from this. People can see God without coming anywhere near a church or a Bible. Indeed, this week I heard testimony from a church in our Tribe Church network who has just baptized several people who just walked into church saying that they had encountered God in some way and needed to know more. John sees that the Greek philosophers have actually got pretty close to understanding at least some of God's nature without having encountered him as Abraham and Moses did. So he uses their concept of logos to explain who Jesus is, in effect extending and refining their philosophy. We see Paul use the same technique in Acts 17 in the heart of the Greek world, Athens. He preaches like this: Men of Athens, I notice that you are very religious in every way. For as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines, and one of your altars had this inscription on it, to an unknown God. This God whom you worship without knowing is the one I'm telling you about. He is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is Lord of heavens and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfied every need. From one man he created all the nations throughout the whole earth. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall, and he determined their boundaries. His purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and exist. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Paul ties together the Greek idols and Greek poetry and reinterprets them in the light of Jesus. He uses their own culture as a bridge, but then having walked across the bridge to their side to find common ground, he invites them back across the bridge to his side by correcting their misunderstandings, like God needing a physical representation as an idol, for example. We need to consider this in how we explain God to people in our own culture, which is now what sociologists call post-Christian. We can no longer assume that people have any significant biblical knowledge. Older generations who grew up with modernism may assume that science has got rid of the need for God. A false assumption, as science not only answers how questions, not why questions. Young people who have grown up in an increasingly postmodern world will question the existence of any absolute truth and be suspicious of institutions like the church that make truth claims, as institutions are seen as roots of oppression. Each person will have their own truth, their own cocktail of ideas and beliefs that is valid for them, while having no expectation that anyone else need believe the same. There are real challenges in how we find bridges to cross into these worldviews to even communicate effectively with the people holding them, who have no idea that there are logical inconsistencies in the way that they look at the world. For instance, the postmodern who says there is no absolute truth is, in that proposition, making a truth statement that they expect everyone to follow, i.e. an absolute truth statement. Liberals are almost always liberal about everything, except you're right not to be liberal. Anyway, we can discuss this in our discussion time in a minute. Let's just cover verse 2 so that we've done more than one verse this week. John's proposition in verse 2 extends what he's just said and alluded to with his Greek reference in verse 1. He existed in the beginning with God. So this word, the logos, is now equated with being a he, a man. For the Greeks, it's a bit like the Force in Star Wars being resident in certain people, the Jedi. Here is the creative force of the universe expressed in the form of a man. Now, I'll say that Star Wars is not a good theological source in general, so I'm quite proud to have found a marginally relevant use for it here. Just don't stretch it too far. I'll finish with a quote from the NIV application commentary. John intends that the whole of his gospel shall be read in the light of this verse. The deeds and words of Jesus are the deeds and words of God. This is the theme that will be echoed throughout the gospel. We will be introduced to Jesus time and again. And in each case, we will be forced to picture Jesus with increasingly profound images. He is the greatest of all people. He is the Messiah of Jewish expectation. But more, this is John's unique message. He is the Son of God, the divine messenger from the Father. That is where we're going eventually, and at a rate of more than 2 verses a week, I promise. But for now, let's discuss verses 1 and 2.